My name is Christopher Callahan. I am currently in my 5th year studying medicine at the University of Edinburgh.
Can you tell us your hometown?
Glasgow.
Could you manage the course you're currently studying?
Sure. So I'm currently studying medicine at the University of Edinburgh.
Why did you choose your course?
I think I was about 16 years old when I first decided that I wanted to become a doctor. And it was from that point that I just started kind of getting a bit more of a realistic insight into medicine and trying to figure out if it really was the thing that I wanted to do. And so I didn't have the grades coming out of high school initially. And so I did another degree before that, which was an honours degree in medical sciences, again at Edinburgh. And also did a master's in human anatomy at Edinburgh Uni as well. And so basically throughout all that time, I just did a lot of placement in hospital or primary care, also volunteering in some of the hospitals, and just reading around, reading some books, medical related books, and just trying to gain a really good insight into what it actually is to be a doctor in the NHS. And so that just kind of further solidified my aim of eventually getting into medical school. And so, yeah, that was essentially my journey. And that's the kind of the main driver behind wanting to go into medicine.
So you said you're in your 5th year.
Yeah.
What have you thought about your course?
As in just medicine in general?
Yeah, medicine.
I've really enjoyed it. I think the one thing that one of the main things about medicine that I love is obviously the practical aspect. That for the preclinical aspect of medicine, yeah, you're kind of doing the typical university experience and you're attending tutorials and lectures and things like that. But when you get to the clinical years, you're actually on the hospital, you're on the wards, or you're in the GP practice, whatever it is, and you actually feel like part of the clinical team. And you clerk patients, you take histories, you do physical examinations, and you report back to the most senior doctors, and you really feel like you're contributing, and you get into that kind of good flow. And yeah, when you spend long enough in a placement and you kind of know you have the knowledge of that specialty enough, then you actually really begin to feel competent, and it's a really nice feeling actually. So I feel like having the typical university experience in preclinical medicine is really good, but then kind of going to the clinical aspect and just being more hands-on with putting everything into practice in a clinical context, I think is really nice, and it's the thing that I've most looked forward to.
You said you were briefly, when you were going through your course and the other degrees you done a bit of placement. Could you talk about what it was like doing a placement while studying?
As in the placement before, the placements before I got into medical school, when I was kind of building up my application?
Yeah.
It was really good actually. So I did volunteering, which I suppose it was doing therapeutics, which is in one of the local hospitals, which is essentially where you bring specially trained dogs into the hospital, into the different wards. So I did that in one of the local children's hospitals, and I was the coordinator of that. And I did that once a week, and so actually it didn't take that much time away from studying, and it didn't take any time away from being able to put in the work and during my course and actually kind of apply to medical school and do all the prep for that. So I thought it was really good. And all of the other placements that I had were only maybe 1 to 3 days. I think one of them was maybe a week long, but that was only during the summer holidays. So I feel like if you're going through a degree and you're trying to do, say, like different placements to eventually study for medicine, it is very feasible. And if you do it right, then to apply for medical school, you don't need that much placement time or time on the wards or chatting to doctors or spending time in hospital. You just need enough where you're able to really talk about it and reflect on it when you're eventually going to medical school interviews. So I feel like you can balance it very well.
And now that you're doing your medical degree, what are you doing a placement while studying?
Yeah, so from 4th year to 6th year of the medical program at Edinburgh, it's essentially all clinical placement, and it's the teaching is kind of slotted in around clinical placement. So we're spending most of our time either in general practice or on the wards, and so it's really nice. I think one of the things that I quite like is doing peripheral placement. So right now, I'm studying medicine at Edinburgh Uni, but I'm at a hospital on the outskirts of Glasgow at the moment for the next 6 weeks. And so they give you free accommodation and you stay there and you just immerse yourself in whatever specialty it is that you're doing. So I'm in psychiatry right now, and I really like it. And you just have kind of either bedside teaching some days of the week where you go with one of the senior doctors and you see particular patients, and the more senior doctors, consultants or whatever, they specifically teach you certain subjects relating to the specialty, or it's like online tutorials or online lectures that you kind of either do in your own time, or it is actually kind of live and facilitated and you just kind of do it working in the accommodation on your laptop. So I think it is a really nice mix of different learning styles.
And did you go to sixth form or college?
So there's sixth form doesn't really exist as far as I'm aware in Scotland. It's not like a separate sixth form. You just do 6 years in secondary school, but it is essentially the same thing. So I did not go to college. I went straight from high school. I did the full 6 years of high school, got my advanced hires, and then I went straight into the medical sciences honours degree, and then I just continued from there. So I've never kind of taken any sort of gap in higher education. I've just kind of continued.
If you had to give your personal opinion for students who may be having to choose subjects for your course, what do you think the best A-level/subjects would be for your course?
I think medicine is quite prescribed in terms of the best subjects to do to get into medical school, and it does. I probably won't give like specific recommendations because it does slightly vary from medical school to medical school, but I think the standard ones that most people do to apply to medicine is, English, maths, and the sciences. Really, those are like the bog standard ones. And I think in terms of like the specific grade cut-offs that you need to achieve, or any other kind of niche subject areas that might be required, that depends from med school to med school. So I think it is good just to do your own research on the med schools that interest you and actually see specifically what their requirements are.
Okay. If we're now going to studying at your university, which is the university you're currently studying at?
Oh, at Edinburgh.
So what are the best and worst things about studying at University of Edinburgh? Starting off with the worst.
The worst. It's quite difficult to think about the worst thing because I absolutely love it. I'm kind of a biased opinion because of, being here for a while, and this is technically my third degree that I'm doing in Edinburgh. But I do absolutely love it. I suppose the one thing that I've heard other people talk about is in terms of the city itself. Although it is the capital city of Scotland, it is still quite small, and it feels quite small. And so when you live in it, it does feel like a very big town as opposed to a large city or the capital city. And I personally love that. But a lot of people, especially if they've maybe previously lived in somewhere like London, then it's definitely nowhere near on the same scale as somewhere like that. So if you're used to, a really busy kind of city environment, Edinburgh is quite different in that respect. Even though it is a capital city, it has a very different kind of feel and vibe. So I think that's definitely, just people's personal preference. But I think that's maybe the one gripe that I've heard from people.
And the best?
I think Edinburgh is beautiful to live in, and it's very historical. You're walking around and you see Edinburgh Castle everywhere. You see Arthur's Seat, which is like an extinct volcano, and so you've got greenery on your doorstep. You've also got all the history, all the buildings. The old buildings are very well conserved, and so you really feel like you're kind of immersed in the city and history and the culture, which is really inspiring, I think. And especially for medicine, Edinburgh has a very kind of prestigious medical history and a lot of medical innovation. And so the medical school itself is very steeped in history from that respect as well. And I feel like you can also cycle everywhere if you wanted to. And so in public transport is also very good. So I think, especially for the medical student, having to, go to and from different GP practices or hospitals or anything like that, nothing ever feels too far away, which I feel is a real benefit that you might not otherwise consider before you come to the university.
Hey, if we go into where you were living, what would
Yeah.
you say if for a student looking to live in the area? What advice would you give them?
I think there are areas within Edinburgh that are very heavily student populated. So whether it's private flats or whether it's Edinburgh University zone student accommodation, there's lots of good options, and you just have to do your research. I've never stayed in private rented accommodation. I've always stayed in Edinburgh University zone accommodation, and I've always found that to be really well managed. And it's not, even as someone like me who's been in university for quite a long time and maybe doesn't want to live in, the kind of proper traditional student accommodation. I live in essentially like the ground floor of a fully detached house, which has a separate front door, and it's rented through the University of Edinburgh. And so although I am living in Edinburgh University rented accommodation, it's not typical halls that you would otherwise think of. So I think Edinburgh is really good in terms of the variety of living environments that you could have while still having the security of renting through the University of Edinburgh themselves.
Okay. And you previously said that you love the best thing about living in Edinburgh is the area is beautiful. Could you say anything you could describe or tell students about like the area, about the student life and living in the area?
From my own experience and from the experience of near enough everyone else that I've talked to, Edinburgh does have a really good mix of environments depending on what you like. So there's people who, go out partying and go clubbing a lot, and especially kind of on the kind of more the kind of centre of Edinburgh, kind of Princes Street and George Street. That kind of area has a lot of really good nightclubs and a lot of good nightlife and bars and things like that, and people really enjoy that. And as well as that, if you enjoy more of the cultural things like, going to art galleries or whatever, then there's plenty of that as well. And if you also enjoy the kind of more relaxed life, like, walking around some greenery, kind of going a bit more into the countryside and these walking routes, again, all of that's just on your doorstep. And there's so many different independent shops and cafes that you can enjoy as well. So I think that in Edinburgh, you can have a really good work-life balance with all of those kind of all of those resources and all those different aspects of leisure just on your doorstep, as well as university in general, which is also really centrally located in Edinburgh.
Great. What general advice would you give to students wanting to study at university?
As in advice once they get into university? Or...
So this is just before they're about to come to university.
Okay, yeah. I think don't stress too much in terms of preparing for university, because, just enjoy the summer before you start, and make sure that you've just got a lot of energy reserves so that you don't burn out, because it can be quite overwhelming when you first start at university, between trying to understand different kind of social circles and trying to make friends and trying to join different societies, as well as the step up in how independently you have to work when you're at university as opposed to when you're at high school. And I think actually the method of studying is probably the number one thing that can help you in terms of your stress when you first get into university. And I think actually understanding that you need to be completely independent in the way that you study, and your time is your own, and you have to make sure that you're disciplined, and working smart is a lot better than just working hard without working smart. And so actually utilising spaced repetition and active recall for everything that you're doing in terms of studying, and also doing little and often throughout the entire year, as opposed to cramming at the end of every semester, which the vast majority of people do. But once you actually do utilise those techniques, you realise actually you're so much less stressed when you get to exam period, and you feel like you can actually enjoy that kind of work-life balance a lot more because you feel more in control throughout the year. So I think for me personally, that's been the most important thing, just in terms of enjoying life while at university in general.
Okay. What advice would you give to students wanting to study your course at university?
I think just know, I think that if you're thinking about applying for medical school, the number one thing first is to have a realistic insight into medicine and to know exactly what you're in for, not to see it through any sort of romanticized lens, to see it for what it really is. And the great thing is now with like YouTube, for instance, or there's lots of online resources or books that you can read that do give you that very realistic insight into what being a doctor, especially in the NHS, is actually like. And as soon as you have that realistic understanding, if you still have the passion for medicine, for helping people, then you know it's for you, and you can go for it. But just the last thing that you want to do is, just have that romanticized view, kind of Grey's Anatomy kind of view of medicine, and then get into med school, and then you realize that you made a mistake. So just make sure that you're fully informed, and then you'll know that you're making the right decision.
And what advice would you give to students wanting to study at Edinburgh University?
I think specific advice for Edinburgh University in general. I think if you want to apply to Edinburgh University, definitely go for it. I think it's got the best of both worlds in terms of it's. I mean, I'm incredibly privileged that I've been able to study at Edinburgh University for this long, and that I'm doing medicine at Edinburgh. Like I'm very grateful for it, and I know how privileged a position that is. And I think that just if you're thinking about applying to Edinburgh University, definitely go for it, because it's so worthwhile. And the people that are here, and how kind of prestigious and also historic the university is, and that it's just right in the centre of the city, and you become completely immersed in it. So I think if anyone's thinking about it, definitely just go for it.
You chose going to university over an apprenticeship. Why did you make this choice?
Well, I wanted to go for medicine, which obviously there's no kind of apprentice style entry into that profession itself. So really university was the only option for me.
Okay. Can you tell us about your YouTube channel?
Sure, yeah. So I have a YouTube channel. It's just my name, Christopher Callahan. And I try and document my life as a medical student at Edinburgh University, and I've been doing it for a little while now. And it's essentially a mix of kind of taking you along with me, doing day in the lifestyle videos, just to kind of take people along with me and give them a realistic insight into what it's actually like on a daily basis being a medical student here. And I also make kind of more informative style videos for either current medical students, incoming medical students, people thinking about applying to medical school, just trying to give as much insight as I can. So yeah, I upload weekly, so I try to make it as informative as I can.
And what is Applymedic?
Yeah, so Applymedic is my medical admissions website, and essentially I offer everything from an ebook that I currently wrote, and there's more coming. The current ebook that's available is basically taking you step by step through how to ace medical school interviews, really. And I also offer one-to-one mock interviews as well, with kind of detailed feedback, and also personal statement reviews. And although there is a charge for those services, if you cannot otherwise afford those, then we also have the Applymedic Scholarship, where you can just write a 200 to 300 word statement outlining you know, roughly why you can't otherwise, you know, afford those services and how those services might benefit you, and you'll get those services for free. So it doesn't matter if you can afford it or not. This, you know, the services will be provided, because one of the things that I do like is just increasing access into medicine, you know, especially from different socioeconomic backgrounds. And I think offering as much free support as well as possible for people who otherwise wouldn't be able to afford it is a really important thing.
Hey, so at this point, let students have what I like to call a free-for-all. You can say what you want about what you like. You say something smart, you say something dumb. Literally, the floor is yours.
Okay. I suppose I'll just I suppose I'll just offer a little bit of motivation, maybe. I don't know. So obviously I took, I guess it's for anyone who, well, anyone who's thinking about applying for medicine, but also anyone who's thinking about doing something, but they can't, they've not got maybe the credentials or whatever to go straight in on the more direct entry into whatever, you know, degree that they want to do. So for instance, in my case, I at 16 or 17 didn't get the grades from school to go straight into medicine, and there were a lot of people around me who were going into medicine at the same time, and they obviously had the grades. And so I was quite a late bloomer in terms of just my intellectual ability and my ability to study and concentrate and just kind of utilize my kind of mental capacity for studies. And so, you know, I made the decision just to use time as a lever and apply to medical sciences at Edinburgh, because I knew that it would give me a great chance of getting into medicine eventually. And then obviously I did the master's degree after that in anatomy, and really, you know, everyone around me were, you know, graduating at that point, or they were kind of nearing the end of their medical degree. But I still didn't let that faze me. And I then went on to medicine, and, you know, I don't regret a single decision that I've made throughout that time, because at the end of the day, I'm going to be a doctor. It doesn't matter if it takes me 2, 3, 4, 5 additional years to get there, because it's what I want to do for the rest of my life. And I feel like, you know, more people should have that kind of mentality. Instead of thinking about the here and now, think about, well, if I sacrifice the short term, what benefits does that give me in the long term? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and I am plugged in.
Amazing. Thank you.